Hey everybody, Andrew here. Let's talk a little bit about the workflow that I recommend for getting through your reading response. This is generally the process that you should take whenever you're trying to develop a piece of writing in response to a single text. So whenever you don't have to do a lot of research, whenever you don't really have to select your topic, whenever you're just given one text and your job is to write some sort of essay that builds upon it, critiques it, does something with the material that's in that text. This is the process that you should probably take. The first step, whenever you're trying to develop a piece of writing in response to something else, is to close read that primary text very carefully. And by that I mean record all of your responses to the text, take note of any words or phrases that are unclear to you, look them up, make sure that you understand any references or mentions of historical events that the author's talking about. Make connections between the material in the text and your own pre-existing knowledge, and write down any questions or thoughts that the text raises in you. After you've done that, the next thing for you to do is to try to develop a summary of the text. So put yourself into the author's shoes. Think about what's the main idea. If you need to boil the text down to its core essence, what is that? What's the main claim that the author's making? What's the takeaway message? What's the big idea that the author is trying to get across? Once you've figured that out and prepared that summary, the next step is to take some time to reflect on how you think and feel about that main idea. Are you essentially in agreement with that text? Do you disagree with its main idea and think there's something wrong with it? Or do you conditionally agree? Which is to say, do you agree with some elements of it but not others? Do you want to take some things that the author's saying but discard something else or reinterpret something else? Those are the three main approaches that you can take whenever you're developing an argumentative response to somebody else's work. So pick one. It's important for you not to remain on the fence whenever you're reading a text. You want to take a clear stance. You want to agree, disagree, or conditionally agree. Don't say there's good things and there's bad things about the text. Of course there are. Think about what is the main claim that you want to make. Do you feel most strongly and do you think most strongly that yes, the author is right, their main idea is something important that we should build upon? No, I think it's wrong, there's something important that they don't get? Or there's something valuable that we want to take from the text, but we need to work with it in some way. We need to do something with it in order for it to be useful. Once you've selected one of those three approaches, the next step is to develop your own argument. And at this stage, I strongly encourage you to use a template when you're doing this. I'll give you a bunch of different templates that should all be posted online, and you should go through those templates and see if they can help you to guide your ideas in a really structured, clear, and precise way. After you've used one of those templates, then I want you to provide additional detail, support, and analysis in the rest of your paper. That template should help you to put together the introductory paragraph, or at least the core sentences of your introductory paragraph. The rest of your reading response drafting process should involve working with that core, fleshing it out, adding more details, evidence, analysis, and so on. So let's think about these three approaches in a little bit more detail. When you agree fundamentally with the text, here are 4 examples of templates that you can use in order to develop a strong thesis statement. The first one is quite useful. So you can say, I agree that X is Y. So I agree when the author makes this claim, X has Y quality. Something has some other quality. Something is in some way rather than another. And then your addition is, because this third thing that was not in the original text confirms it. So with this, you're taking the same basic position as the author you're responding to, but you're adding a supplement to it. The second template here does a very similar thing. The author is surely right about this topic because, as she may not be aware, recent studies have shown that something else. This is a great template to use when you're responding to something that's a little bit older and new research has been done on the topic that confirms that the author was right. So we can think, for instance, about how Einstein developed his general theory of relativity, and in the decades since he developed that work, all sorts of studies have been done that confirmed that indeed he was correct in that time. Here's another one that you can use when you fundamentally agree with the author. X's theory of something is extremely useful because it sheds light on the different problem of something else. In this type of response, what you're doing is you're taking the author's argument, but you're applying it to something new, something that the author did not himself or herself actually say. So this is quite useful when you're trying to recontextualize something, put it to work for you. The last template that you can use here is those unfamiliar with this school of thought may be interested to know that it basically comes down to something. So what you're doing in this sort of essay is taking an author's position and rephrasing it or reframing it, boiling it down in some way, describing it using different vocabulary than the author themselves used. So this is a great way to demonstrate that you have true, deep understanding of the topic, so much so that you can actually explain it in a novel way. Okay, so here are some templates that you can use when you disagree with what the author's saying. The first one is, the author is mistaken because she overlooks something. So this is where you just think the author is missing some important piece of information that refutes whatever their claim is. Fairly straightforward. The second one is the author's claim that, whatever their argument is, rests upon the questionable assumption that something else. So here, what you're suggesting is that the author gets it wrong, not because they're missing a piece of information, but because they have a false premise. There's some assumption that they're making about the world, which is just not correct, or somehow it's shaky, and you're challenging that. In the rest of your paper, you'd attack that assumption and reveal how it's not an assumption that a person could legitimately make. The third template that you can use is something like, I disagree with the author's views that something, because as somebody else has shown, some other argument. So in this case, you're using another author's ideas to critique that first author that you're looking at. In the next template, you claim the author contradicts herself / can't have it both ways. On the one hand, she argues something. On the other, she also says something else. So here, you're making an argument against the author by suggesting that there's a contradiction in what they're saying. They're making two claims that cannot be held simultaneously. They rule each other out in some way. The next one that you can use is this. By focusing on something, the author overlooks the deeper problem of something. So in this sort of response, your claim would be that the author is essentially missing the forest for the trees. So they're focusing in the wrong place. They're dedicating their energy to looking at something that's secondary, accidental, or irrelevant, and missing some more important issue that overrides whatever it is that they claim to say. The last no template is the author's assertion that, whatever their argument is, does not fit the facts of the story. So this is similar to the first template, and it's essentially saying the author is incorrect because they've made some sort of empirical mistake. They're missing information. They maybe are unaware of what actually happened, relying on false sources, something like that. but you're going to try to say in the rest of your paper that what really happened, and whatever it is that the author's talking about, is not reconcilable with the claims that the author's making. Okay, so this last approach is when you conditionally agree with an author. So you like some of what they're saying, but some of it you need to jettison for some reason. Here's the first one. Although I agree with the author up to a point, I cannot accept his overriding assumption that something. So here's where you like some things about it, you like it maybe 90% of the way, but there's some assumption they're making that you need to throw out. Next. Although, while much of what the author says is inaccurate, his final conclusion that something is correct. So here, you actually don't like most of the article. You think a lot of it is incorrect, or at least it rubs you the wrong way for some reason. But the final concluding point, the central takeaway message, is something that you agree with. This might be a situation where you think that the author is right, but for the wrong reasons. The next is, the author is right that something, but she seems on more dubious ground when she claims that something else. So here, you distinguish very clearly in your essay between the things the author gets right and the things that you think the author gets wrong, why you think that they're wrong. The final template is almost exactly the same, just slightly different wording. While the author is probably right when she claims that this, she is right when she says something else. Okay. Here's a general kind of template that you can use when you're dealing with a broader topic. We'll think about this one in more detail later in the course. Here's another one, a 2-paragraph starter, when you just want to respond to what an author is saying and you're not quite sure where you stand yet. Try using this starter paragraph to get you rolling, and it should help to push you in a productive direction. So this forces you to summarize what the author has to say and to focus on specific passages that exemplify it. And then it forces you to take a stance. Do you think they're right? Do you think they're wrong? Why? Why specifically do you think that? What are some possible objections that you can take on? So let's try putting this into practice.